Welcome, this is Michael Wyndham, and you're watching A Stranger and a Pilgrim. Please enjoy our show. Today on Point Counterpoint, the topic is the ethics of abortion. Joining us on the point is once again Elijah Schultz.
I know that people have a lot of really heartfelt views about this and a lot of that is motivated by their religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. What I would first say is that religious beliefs vary, even amongst Christians. I think from what I've seen, the most anti-abortion views out there do come from certain segments of the Christian population. Mm-hmm. They're from lots of non-Christian religions. For a lot of them, it's not even an issue. Other religions don't have those same viewpoints regarding aborting a fetus before it's born. But even within Christianity, there's a lot of Christians that didn't have those same views. From what I heard, like 100 years ago, being anti-abortion was mostly seen as a Catholic stance. A lot of Protestants weren't even really all that concerned with it.
I don't think 100 years ago anybody's even aware of it to be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's only been in my lifetime that it's been on any kind of a national scale. That people even be aware of it. 73 Roe versus Wade, I was born in 74, so it's really within my lifetime.
Right.
I'm old, I know. But so I think that had some connection to it. Plus, there's a lot of hype.
Yeah.
A lot of hype. A lot of, for political, to gain the vote, to gain, create their own tribal disenfranchisement, us against you type of mentality. I think that was why it was as hyped as it was, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's another example of secular, worldly politicians using a religious issue to sway religious Christians of a certain variety to go along and support them, even though those same politicians might wage a war where they don't really care about killing civilians, and so they'll still end up killing babies for that reason.
Right.
But abortion has existed throughout human history. There's all kinds of procedures, whether it's surgical or medicinal, that can be used to induce abortion, and so that's not a new issue in and of itself. It's just been given a new spin in recent decades. But one in particular that I would call attention to is that in certain Christian religions, I've seen them use the idea of a human being becomes a soul when it receives the breath of life. So when it gets born and it breathes in that life, then like beforehand it might have been a body and a spirit, but when it breathes in the breath of life, then it becomes a soul. And from that's just
I've heard it, and I'm like, that's where do you get that from?
Yeah, I mean, but again, that's an issue where someone from a religious perspective can say that that's what they believe in their heart.
Sure.
And because soul is an abstract concept, you can't really prove it or disprove it objectively if that's what they're committed to believing. But what I would point out, though, is that is a religious belief which could push the ethical boundaries of abortion even further than what I would be comfortable with from a secular viewpoint.
I mean, that means you can kill them all the way up till after they've been breathing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's okay. I'm not sure where the logic on that one is, but okay, whatever.
Right. But because like even after Roe v. Wade, for a long time, the legal standard for when abortion would no longer be allowed was the point of viability, the point when the fetus could be removed from the mother and could be sustained and could grow up. And that happened around the 6th month. Now, I would still sort of, from a secular viewpoint, I would still agree with that approximate timeline, but I'm coming at it from the perspective of when is the fetus capable of cognitive recognition, cognitive ability. So
I'm going to steal this. I stole this from your dad. My opinion light's on. And that is, I go heartbeat to heartbeat because that's we've always traditionally, this person's dead when there's no longer a heartbeat.
Right.
So I go heartbeat to heartbeat. I don't care about what happens before the heartbeat because there's no life there as far as I know. And as far as my worldview, you know, life is in the blood. There's got to be something more scientific than just the soul, you know, or any of that kind of stuff. So that's my opinion when I look at it. But at the same time, that gets me in a lot of trouble with my fellow fundamentalists because those who believe in life at conception, they hate my position on that, even though mine just seems to make more sense to me. When there's a heartbeat, well, or no heartbeat. I know I had a heart attack, so mine is like heartbeat, so important. So that's where I go from. I don't even believe in brain death. I believe you know, heartbeat is the key. But that's my opinion.
Okay. So I used to consider life to begin around the 6th week of gestation because that was when one could start to detect brain waves. But eventually I realized that what makes someone a person is the ability to have cognitive thought, to be self-aware. One thing in particular, scientific tidbit that I picked up after I became secular and I was still kind of struggling with this issue was that I found out that when a fetus turns into identical twins, that happens, I don't recall exactly when, but either several weeks or several months after gestation. Before that, it's just a single embryo. And I mean, okay, so here we're going to be kind of mixing science with abstract thought a bit. You know, it seems to me that a soul is individual. You know, I don't feel like I have multiple people inside of me. I feel like I'm one person. And so if a single embryo ends up turning into two different people, you know, ends up having two different souls, then there wouldn't have been one soul, you know, a single soul in that embryo before that point in which it divided into two people. You know, it's like, what, did the soul split in half? Did it grow another soul? So, I mean, it just seemed simpler to say that, you know, we get our souls, you know, somewhat after that point. But, I mean, that's less of a scientific objective observation. It's more of an opinion feeling observation that I had. So just something that I kind of wanted to throw in there. But in terms of recognizing personhood as the ability for cognitive thought, that idea kind of goes back thousands of years. I believe it was Aristotle who made a lot of points about what separates man from the animals is his capacity for reason. And so, you know, just that whole aspect of rationality.
Have we been able to, question actually, have we been able to identify at what point in the development of a child in the womb does it develop cognitive rationality? Do we know that? Or does it not until he's 2 years old or 3 years old? Because I've seen some really stupid children. So the question is, at what point do they develop that? That would be something I would like to investigate more if I was to look into it. Because I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know if anybody really does because I'm not sure they've ever tested for that.
Right. Well, there are actually a lot of research studies on the subject, and I mean, I've kind of browsed over them, but I'm not a medical doctor. Well, there's a lot of the high-tech terminology that just goes right over my head.
Okay.
But there are, medical ethics panels out there that struggle with these issues. And, from what I've seen, the general consensus is that, in order for someone to be cognitive, to have that capacity, there are certain parts of their brain which have to reach a certain level of development before that's even possible. Because, earlier, I was saying, well, around 6 weeks is when you start having brain waves. Technically, yes, but that's those brain waves are used to control autonomic functions like the beating of the heart or the release of endorphins or things like that. And those are just bodily functions that aren't really involved with awareness, processing information, true cognition. And so there are certain segments of the brain which do specific things, and you can look at. I believe the search term that I used was fetal cognition, and that just brought up a whole lot of different medical studies.
Maybe something different.
So yeah, and something to look into deeper. But the general consensus was that it was somewhere between 25 to 35 weeks of gestation when you could even begin to have the start of what could be thought of as cognition. Because they were saying even a newborn has only the bare minimum of basic cognition in the sense of being able to differentiate between yourself and other people, being able to process information and reflect upon what that is. So those are the kinds of questions that medical ethicists wrestle with, and that's something that if you really want to dive into it, you'll want to look up those medical studies and see what they have to say.
I have my youngest son, he was born extremely premature. They did everything they could to keep him in as long as they could, and he developed a lot of mental issues at the beginning specifically. So I don't know, it seems like the brainwave and all that's a bit of a sliding scale. So he may not qualify based on some of that at the beginning. He does now. He's quite a wonderful young man. He's autistic, but he's incredibly smart and active and stuff. But at the beginning, he may not have fit on that sliding scale. So that's why I always look at these things like this. Like, okay, awesome, that's cool. It's great to research that, but what does that mean? They don't even know what it means yet. They're not even sure what that means yet. So it's not helpful.
Well, but it's important for us to admit that we don't have all the answers,
right.
Because that's what allows us to keep that open mind. But and it's also important though to recognize that even if there are situations where even if we don't have all the answers, a decision still has to be made, and in cases like that, you just have to go with the best information that you have.
Right. I always err on the side of love, compassion, life. Kind of like when they used to lobotomize people based on really faulty information, really faulty science. And for years they thought it was the right thing. I would have always erred on the side of don't mess with their brains, leave them alone. So that would always been my thing. Always on the side of I don't know enough. We haven't got this down to really dialed in yet. So let's just wait until we get this dialed in.
Right.
So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah. So, well, like you say, it's kind of a sliding scale, and we can't really be sure. It's a bit of a gray area. And we can't tell firsthand because we can't remember what it was like to be in the womb. I think the earliest memories that I have are from like maybe 3 or 4 years old. Some people might have gotten as early as 2 years old.
I know one guy who claims to remember being born, and he's messed up. It's messed up. So apparently the process, it's a good thing we don't remember that part of the deal. Apparently it really messes with you. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
So, however, though, since it is sort of a gray area, then on the one hand, yes, we do need to be considerate of a human being's right to live, and we need to seriously consider at what point exactly does that right begin. But we also have to balance that right against the right of a woman to decide what's going to happen to her body, especially since so many times pregnancies can cause health complications, and it can if you've got lawyers that are second guessing medical decisions from a courtroom thousands of miles away and imposing their will, then you can.
Really murky what they're doing with that,
Then you can end up causing medical complications that never should have happened because the woman and her doctor who are there in the moment should have the freedom to make that decision. Because because it is an area where we don't have where we don't have absolute knowledge, then we have to weigh the life of the fetus against the freedom of the mother, and so in that situation, though, yes, I do quite often see how you want to err on the side of life, because once a thing is terminated, you can't bring it back. But it's also important to give benefit of the doubt to the people that are there on the ground, that are experiencing it firsthand. And so that's kind of where the balancing act is. Now, a lot of people will talk about how America is awash in the blood of the innocents, and it's a genocide of the unborn, and babies are being slaughtered in the womb, and to me that seems like they're trying to hype it up in order to justify their extreme positions, because if you look at abortion rates of what kinds of abortion happen and when they happen, understanding that from a extreme religious perspective, they will consider even the birth, even the pill, which flushes out a recently fertilized embryo, they'll consider that abortion, and so
Right.
They'll say there's hundreds of thousands of babies being aborted every year. Well, most of them are within those first few weeks. So does that really count? But then, if you look later, you look further on into abortions happening at a few weeks, happening at a few months. Most of the time, when it comes to a woman getting an abortion, they'll try, once they know that they have it and that they don't want it, they're going to try to, have that abortion as soon as possible. And doctors agree with this, too. If that's going to happen, make it happen as soon as possible. And
I just remember there's that television show, I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant. You ever see that one where they give them birth and they didn't know they were pregnant the whole time? I mean, it's like, okay, when do they know? I mean, the second time they missed a period, that's after heartbeat starts. So it's really, I have no problem with the morning after deal or those kinds of things. If that's how you protect yourself, go into it with a condom or some sort of prophylactic or something. I'm party on, but I don't know. Everything else becomes a sliding scale again. It becomes what is and what is not. When does life begin? When is it? We know that, certain, when it's no longer, we know for a fact no heartbeat is dead. That's all we know. We don't know anything else yet, but we're learning. We're growing. But I also agree with you, it shouldn't be a legal issue. The law should stay out of it. It's a moral issue.
Yeah.
And if, as a fundamentalist Christian, my job isn't to protest abortion clinics. My job is to love women who are in a situation and help them get through this. That's my position.
Yeah.
And for me, that means if the baby's viable, don't kill it. And if you can't raise it, I'll raise it for you. And I'll take care of you as well. I'll make sure you're taken care of. So there's a whole different way we're supposed to deport ourselves in the world, and we're just not. We're just shucking all responsibility onto a evil government and getting them to do whatever we want them to do, good or bad. Either way, whatever we're trying to do, we're trying to shuck it off on something else, not take responsibility. Sorry, I'm getting all preachy. Sorry about that.
Helps to extend the podcast. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers the whole idea of how we've got to balance one against the other, and should keep the government out of it. It's not the Christians' responsibility to force the government to enforce this particular position or that particular position.
I think when you look at anybody, like you said, there's fundamentalists in every organization, every group, every religion, everything, but they're just people. And everybody votes their conscience, wherever their conscience is. So that's, so people are going to vote their conscience, whether they believe this is right or this is wrong, regardless of fill in the blank on that. So I've always maintained that there are a separation between a believer and a Christian, and those who have made a commitment to actually follow Jesus Christ as disciples. So those who are believers are going to do whatever they're going to do, but disciples are forbidden to do certain things and interact in a certain way with the secular world, like you were talking about before. So I don't get too hung up about believers, because they're going to do whatever they're going to do. Most of them are just half-assed anyway. So, but when I make that distinction, when I go back to that thing, what are we supposed to do as disciples? There's a whole plethora of stuff that we're just not doing. Mm-hmm. And if we did what we were supposed to be doing instead of meddling with the secular, it would change society around us. If we really loved people, really did something in a real radical and relevant way, a lot of these social issues would simply go away, or at least be severely minimalized. That's my opinion, my belief on that. Mm-hmm. And my ministry I had for a long time called Love Join. It wasn't about Christians. It was just people joining together with love to love people. Mm-hmm. And so it would be regardless of your religious or non-religious persuasion, we're trying to love somebody. We're trying to make a change in people's lives in a real way that helps them and benefits them and promotes them as individuals. And we've lost that, I believe, as Christians. We've lost that focus on an individual and become, what's the greatest good? Well, we can do it by swinging the government axe. No, that doesn't work. The government sword is destructive and evil. It doesn't matter what your position is. If once you get the government involved, in my opinion, you've crossed the line to what crushes certain people and promotes only their own positions. And it doesn't matter what your position is. That's just evil in the end. You got to love people and have these conversations where we can talk and disagree, but still love each other and still see, hey, man, we have some commonality in some things we think about. Mm-hmm. Try to move forward with that. So that's the only change of any kind. It's the only way you're going to change me. It's the only way I'm going to change you. Yeah, is through that. Mm-hmm. So, yep. By the way, it's not my goal to change you. My goal is to listen and then share.
That's it. Good goal. So yeah, just wrapping up. Those are the the real factors that kind of define where the balancing points are and how we have to address those issues. So I would just speak a few more points on the effects that trying to enforce those views through the government can have, because it can have unintended consequences, like when you've got healthcare providers that have to deal with these laws which aren't that are written thousands of miles away and aren't particular to this situation, then you've got them second guessing themselves, because they're not necessarily acting according to what's the best medical judgment to preserve the health of the patient. They have to follow this arbitrary law handed down from the Capitol building, and so that interferes with their ability to make good medical decisions. And not only does that complicate things in the hospital there and now, but also because a lot of these issues are being implemented at the state level. A lot of the healthcare providers that are living in the more strict conservative states, they're pulling up stakes and moving over to liberal states where they have more freedom, and so they don't have all of those restrictions on them, which means that now a lot of hospitals are understaffed or closing down, and so that's affecting people of all across society, whether it's women who are having problems with their pregnancy and they want to keep their child. There's not as many healthcare providers to help them out now, and there are women who have died from healthcare complications because the nearby hospital had to close down and they couldn't get to the further hospital in time to solve their problem. So that's just kind of unintended consequences from meddling in people's decisions. And like you said, I think the best way to reduce and limit abortions is to educate people and on safe methods and recognizing the signs earlier and things like that, but also to empower women to be able to not be dependent upon a man in certain situations, because a lot of the times the reason for these abortions is that they're in like a woman is dependent upon a man because she's like just financially linked to him, or he might be domestically abusive and would threaten her if she leaves, and so she's afraid to leave that situation, and so that gets more into a matter of economic freedom, where the system that we live in wants to keep people poor so that they can have cheap labor, but then that compels people to sometimes stay in unhealthy living situations, because that's the only way to pay the rent and pay the bills.
Today on Counterpoint is Reverend John Whitting.
Was the ethics of abortion.
Yeah.
I am probably a little different than a lot of people are on abortion. I don't have any of the questions that he had. It doesn't matter to me when the fetus is viable. Doesn't matter when life began, in my opinion. I don't think that is a justifiable cause for abortion except to save the life of the mother. Now, do I think that we should pass a law to make it this or that? No. I don't think the federal government has any business in the abortion business. I think in our form of government that should be a state issue. I do not think that there is any viable purpose for me to try to get the lost, unbelieving world to live by Christian principles.
Right.
I believe that for Christians, the abortion issue is actually pretty simple. Romans 8:28 has been one of my guiding verses since I became a Christian. And we know that all things work together for good to them who love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. And I believe that's true. It's just as true today as when Paul put pen to parchment and put it down. I know that there's nowhere in Scripture that God reinforced that by saying, and I'll explain it all to you before it happens. Not a clue.
Right.
It's about trusting God and knowing that God is sovereign, which does not mean that we don't have choice. But God has said that he would make all things work together for good. Not for what we want necessarily. But he will make something good happen out of things that would otherwise be tragedy to us. And I think that would include an unexpected pregnancy.
Yeah.
The world point of view is treating abortion like birth control.
Right.
I personally would like to see every baby born alive, grow up. But I do not think that in this matter of abortion, that the loss of the baby is the biggest concern. I believe that there are two other areas that are even more significant. One is the loss to culture and society. Where would we be if Jonas Salk's mother aborted him? We wouldn't have the polio vaccine. Where would we be if Einstein's mother aborted him? We wouldn't have so much of modern science and theory. Where would we be if our mother aborted us? We wouldn't be here. I think our world may be missing out on a lot of things because people that God would have used to accomplish things never get a chance to live. But I think the thing that most concerns me about abortion is what it does to the mother. I have met too many women who have had abortions because they were told that's what they should do, because the pregnancy was unexpected, or maybe they weren't married, or they didn't have resources to raise a child. And there's great tragedy in that. My wife is an adoptee. She was adopted as an infant. I think she was maybe a month or two old when the adoptive parents took her. And she's never bonded with them. And that's caused her a lot of pain. And through her experience, I've also been able to interact with many other adoptees on some online groups and conversations that we've had in person. And there's a lot of heartache involved in that. And many people may be more able to relate to the adoption heartache. The adoptee feels that. Sometimes the adoptive parents do as well, but more often the adoptee. But when it comes to abortion, the mother, and sometimes the father of the child that was aborted, lives with a regret, a sense of tragedy and emptiness that cannot be filled. Trying to think of the author's name who wrote, that's how old I'm getting. I can't even remember the name of the book now. Piercing the Darkness. Do you remember the author's name on it?
Nope, but I know the book.
Okay. Anyway, he wrote several books along that line, but he also wrote a short little book.
This Present Darkness, Piercing the Darkness,
Yeah.
and I can't remember the rest of it. Yeah.
Right. The other small book that he wrote was something about, I think the name was Emily, and I would recommend people look it up and read it. He wrote a story about a young woman who aborted a child, and also from this perspective of the aborted child, from eternity's point of view. And it was very revealing and a well done book, and I think it would touch a lot of hearts. And I think as Christians, when we come to the matter of abortion, we need to back away from judging people and standing outside abortion clinics and calling people murderers and things like that. There are an awful lot of broken hearts over the issue of abortion. And I think that we as believers who love the Lord, who love the Word of God, and who love God's creation, other people who are created in His image like we are, we ought to recognize the heart of God for the brokenhearted. And instead of beating them up, we ought to establish the kind of relationship where we can put an arm around them and come alongside and said, let me help you. Let me help you through this.
Well, it's just easier to beat them up, and it gives you a lot of self-gratification and self-righteousness to do that. So that's why it's so popular.
Yeah.
And you actually think you're trying to do something good. So there is a kernel of that there as well.